join us. We know your time is hard to come by, and we really appreciate it. Just to start off with a couple items about these two companies. Artsyl was established in 2002. They have 50 plus employees. They help organizations to take the pain out of their sales order process by automating the most inefficient and error-prone tasks, that document handling and data entry. Their Doc Alpha business digitation platform order action application transform that scanned paper from email, fax, scanners into digitable orders that can have actionable information that resides in Dynamics GP, and that allows for shorter cycle times, fewer errors, better process control, and improved customer service overall. And then also we're joined today by StarShip, their strategic UPS ready partner, Gold FedEx compatible solution provider, and they have a wide range of carriers available to select from and rate shopping that small parcel, regional, and LTL out of Dynamics GP. So they take all the information about the shipment and they select the best shipment carrier based on all the rules of the shipment. And this is just a little bit about the workflow we're going to review today. Order comes in via email, phone, fax, scan, and Artsyl will digitally translate that paper-based order with intelligent data capture and send that information into Microsoft Dynamics GP, where StarShip will grab all those details of that order and select the best carrier based on all the rules of the shipment, where the customer is located, how much the shipment costs, the dimensional weight of the package, and get that shipment out so you can send all the information into accounts receivable and collect payment. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Will to start it off with Artsyl. Thank you so much, Will.
Oh, you bet. Thank you, Adrian. I'm going to switch over to presentation mode here, make sure it's sharing the right monitor, and get my presentation rolling here today. Again, this is Will Stagel. I'm working marketing at Artsyl Technologies. It's a pleasure to be here today. And Adrian, you made this process sound so simple and easy. And I know today for those clients and for partners who have helped companies to try to automate the process of order entry and filling orders and tracking and managing everything, that's probably not likely the world they're living in today, but I'm going to walk you through a demo that shows you how you can streamline and eliminate a lot of steps in that process, target and eliminate bottlenecks, and as Adrian said, get rid of some of the most painful elements in that process, meaning things like manual data entry that's really slowing down the process and introducing errors. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit and first introduce our company Artsyl very briefly, and then talk to you about our transformation platform, how it integrates with Dynamics GP to either automate the full process end-to-end or any elements in between the receipt of an order to fulfillment. Just a little bit about Artsyl. We were founded in 2002, as Adrian mentioned. We have offices in the US and Canada. We're headquartered in Toronto. We're best known for our product Doc Alpha and its advanced capture capabilities. But beyond just giving you the ability to transform either an electronic document that started its life electronically, like a Word document or PDF that you may receive as an email and attachment, or a scanned piece of paper that then became digital, we not only capture information off of that document intelligently, we can also support automating the process and giving you business process automation tools in a platform that works either for order processing, invoice processing, and a wide range of other business processes as well. So the market that we are in and the dynamics that we're experiencing today is focused on this concept of digital transformation, aided by new technologies and approaches like robotic process automation. So I'm going to talk about what that means and how that relates to order process automation in general, but just some interesting statistics in terms of how companies are looking at and thinking about these new technology approaches. 81% of organizations believe that digital transformation is important. These are industry surveys. Over half of them believe that they're living on the edge today in terms of how they're doing things at the moment. but 1 in 5 of those organizations believe that they're near where they want to be of their core transformation challenge. So they're facing business challenges today. They understand that there are technology solutions that are emerging, and it's a really exciting time if you're looking for ways to leapfrog and go from a manual process to something that's really adaptable and flexible enough to meet the growing changes of your business and the dynamics of day-to-day life. So ERPs like Dynamics ERP have many business modules, whether that's financials, CRM components, project accounting, manufacturing, distribution. Many have document management components and services. And all of them have a document component or dependency associated with those processes. And those documents need to be processed, and the information needs to be extracted from that and validated, either manually by a human being taking a piece of paper or a digital document and keying in information or validating it against existing business records. But the challenge of doing that with a team, a staff that's doing it manually, is that the process doesn't scale. And every step of the way, whether it's involved handling the document itself or doing the data entry, you're introducing potential errors along with delays. So the challenge the companies have is not all documents are the same, right? There are tools out there, and they've existed for a long time, to help you extract information when that data is structured and the location of the information you want is predictable. But the reality is, whether you're talking about orders or you're talking about invoices, a lot of times that information appears in all kinds of different places. So when data is not in the same place from document to document, it can really slow things down. And there we're talking about a range of documents, from very structured things like electronic forms to semi-structured documents where the data may be in different locations, or completely unstructured forms where the data may be all over the map, right? That could be in the cover letter or an email where the content is essentially conversational, but there still may be something relevant in there, the customer name, a PO number, etc. And ideally what we want is a way to eliminate the human element in that process, make it more predictable and scalable. Because we have much experience processing many different types of documents, we've gained a lot of knowledge about customer requirements. And based on the most common types of projects that benefit the most from what our platform provides, we offer a lot of different vertical solutions with out-of-the-box functionality. And that means we give you tools that very quickly and easily can be set up to extract the most common elements required for a given document type. That includes invoices, that includes orders, which we're talking about today, expense reports, remittance processing. Again, we can take data out of the documents that are part of that process and radically streamline and improve the process once we have the data in hand. So we call the packages that we've created to streamline implementation of these kinds of automated solutions Action Platform, or Action Platform solutions. They're prepackaged. That means that you can minimize the services and uptime for them. And the ultimate benefit to your customers is that, as much as 80% of the required data that they need to automate these processes can be extracted out of the box without any additional configuration. So these package solutions, along with our transformation platform, can be deployed in a number of ways, on-premise, hosted, or as a cloud software as a service offering as well. So with that perspective, we're going to drill down specifically into sales orders today. Sales order processing continues to be a major source of frustration for busy distributors and manufacturers. As many organizations strive to optimize operations, order management is often overlooked as the costs are not clearly separated. Despite technology improvements, many companies continue to manually enter customer purchase orders as sales orders into their ERP systems. That's creating huge bottlenecks and, again, creating potential errors into the process as a whole. So when you look at how orders are processed today, absent any automation, you can see why this is a process with ample room for improvement. Improvements that can reduce your sales outstanding, enhance your customer experience, and deliver more timely access to order details that translate into better insights into customer behavior and purchasing trends. So all those steps that you deal with manually today, from quotes that result in orders, that turn into sales orders, that end up being transaction records in your ERP system, all of that can be automated, right? And so all those processes of collecting, sorting, information, validating that information to ensure that it's correct, dealing with exceptions, and then ultimately the order entry. All of that is stuff that we can help radically improve that'll result in greater overall return on investment for the ERP system that you as a Dynamics partner are dedicating to ensuring for your customers, adding value and making them feel good about the investments they've made so far. The challenges that are inherent to order processing or other high-volume processes like vendor invoices are exactly the kind of challenges that are a perfect match for the technology that we offer. So process automation using platforms like our Doc Alpha transformation platform and applications specifically like Order Action. When I say it's a perfect fit, I mean because oftentimes this sort of automation works the best when you've got a large volume of documents and data, so a large volume of orders, that you don't have control over. So because they're often externally generated, they're going to have multiple formats. And that means you need an intelligent solution that can deal with that in lieu of having a human being manually deal with every piece of paper and every order and every keystroke along the way. So we're going to look at what's at the core of our solution. Again, at the core of the application called Order Action. First, we help to streamline and automate the process of acquiring documents. We do this through supporting what we call multi-channel input, meaning, as Adrian described, all the different ways that you may receive those orders today, whether they're native electronic and they're an email attachment, whether they come to you in paper form, whether they come to you from a fax machine. Some people are still doing that today, believe it or not. We can automatically acquire documents from any of those sources, file shares, network folders, email, you name it, and then register them with the system and kick off the appropriate process. So step one is just getting the documents, all of them, no matter where they came from, into our system smoothly and efficiently, and then transforming those documents. First of all, if they're a scanned document, cleaning up the image, de-skewing it, and then transforming everything that's in that document image into digital content and then into information. So we clean up the image as best as we can. We OCR the document. That document is classified, so we understand what type of document we're looking at. And then we extract the required data from the document. As part of that process as well, let's say you received a large batch of documents, maybe it was a bunch of paper that was all scanned. We can split those documents out into batches as required as part of the process as well. And then, now that we've got the data extracted efficiently from the documents, we can apply any business rules based on the process and based on the document type. So step one is radically making the process of just getting data more efficient. And when it comes to orders and order processing, by the way, that doesn't just translate into making the overall days sales outstanding go down and reducing that cycle time. The other meaningful component to that is we find customers who tell us, you know what, when we did this manually, we only focused on header level details, which means we're missing out on all that line item level detailed information that we could also use to take a look at things like buying behaviors and buying trends so we can be more proactive and predictive overall as it comes to our sales and fulfillment process. I mentioned, and so let's talk about that a little bit. Next step, again, to properly classify the document, we're using what we call a cascading methodology, which means we can reference multiple data fields and databases to identify the type of document we're talking about here. So again, that's where we can leverage integration with Dynamics GP to help identify the type of document that we've got by looking at the different data fields that may be present and then understanding the document we've got to work with and the business process that should be associated with it. So because we have this cascading methodology and we can look at multiple data sources and quickly identify the type of document and how to handle it, that means faster processing, higher accuracy, and again, we've reduced the manual steps and delays in the process up front. Another area that's unique and that we can automate is the way that we validate business rules and apply matching and duplicate detection. So we can automatically detect and eliminate duplicate orders that were unintentional. During the process, the customer and order data is reconciled against multiple databases again to ensure that what's being ordered and invoiced matches and falls to within expectations. So we're handling everything that follows the rules for you automatically, And then if there's exceptions, like a duplicate, we can also deal with those automatically. And then if there's other weird issues and exceptions, we can hand those off to a human operator or a process owner to deal with those. So we're radically minimizing their workload and allowing them to apply their knowledge and expertise where it really makes a difference. So we're going to quickly look at three common scenarios as they relate to the receipt of a customer purchase order to be matched against an invoice and other supporting documents in the order to cash process. At the end of the day, regardless of the specific steps and the processes we look at here based on the different scenarios, the ultimate goal is to automate and streamline the entry of that data in the appropriate transaction records in Dynamics GP. So you notice here the ultimate destination is your ERP system. How you get there depends on a number of things, the business rules involved, if you need approvers to take a look and review things along the way, or it could be a straight-through process where everything's validated by the system, and then that transaction entry is handled for you automatically. So the first scenario we're going to look at is the simplest. An email with purchase order attached is received. All the requisite information is included and correct in the document and the communications that you've received. And we can facilitate that straight-through process with no human intervention required. The next scenario we're going to look at is a process where a process owner has a digital purchase order that will be manually uploaded into the system. And there may be some exceptions that we're going to take a look at and that the system identifies that need to be handled. So that's scenario 2. And then finally, we'll look at a scenario where we have a batch of purchase orders that have been saved or generated as a single file, maybe by your mailroom, and then show how the workflow process may go from there and just illustrate how our system has the intelligence then to separate out and parse out those individual documents and then handle them accordingly. So as I mentioned, the first scenario is the simplest one where the automation does all the work. That means that that Doc Alpha and that order action handles the reading of all the characters in the document itself through multiple entry points, right? It monitors the mailbox where those emails are going to show up. It routes those documents appropriately. It extracts all of the required information to create the sales order for you and knows where to find it. It applies all the business rules, and in this case, the assumption is if we've validated all the data is correct and complete, the business rule dictates that now we can load that information into the sales order. We basically create that sales order associated with the appropriate transaction record there in Dynamics GP. So simple and straightforward. The next scenario that we're going to take a look at is when we have a user that's going to upload these documents and begin the process manually. So they're going to add files to what you see on screen here, which is the interface for Doc Alpha. So they're basically just going to add those. They're going to browse and add those individual files that you've received into the system for processing. You have the option then to assign them to a particular user in the system then, so they can handle those documents. And then you're just going to send the batch to the system. So in this semi-automated process, they've uploaded the files here. We've assigned it to an appropriate user. And then from there, business rules are enacted. So in this scenario, purchase orders from this particular customer greater than $3,000 require an additional level of scrutiny. So we're going to pass it on to an approver as part of the process automatically for you. So it goes to the approver. They receive an email notification letting know that there are batches for them to review and approve as part of the process here. They have the ability then to both review the document as well as the data. We do things like validate the totals and subtotals, by the way, as part of this process. But in this case, the user can just validate that everything matches. And then they have the option to act accordingly. If everything looks great, they can approve it. And again, it moves through to the next part of the process, which is the transaction creation. They can reject it, and that can trigger business rules to route it back to the appropriate party for correction, escalation, et cetera, et cetera. So it gives you flexibility. This is pretty typical of any workflow tool you've seen here. But again, what we've done is it tackled the most painful part of the process first up front, which is getting the data into the system to trigger all that workflow and that approval process. So again, once that approval is complete, we create that transaction entry by virtue of our connection to Dynamics GP. And by the way, for those of you out there who are not only Dynamics GP partners, but you support other members of the Dynamics ERP family, we offer integrations with those platforms as well. In our final scenario here, we're going to take a look at a batch of orders that have arrived as a single scan PDF from the mailroom. So Doc Alpha, our platform, can easily handle the OCR splitting and validation process. But in this scenario, we're going to throw a curveball into what happens here. So once the data is extracted, again, we talked about this kind of cascading function that we've got to validate data. Let's say an error message is thrown here. There's specific data that we couldn't extract from the order. And we also determined that there was a price mismatch. So we can route that now to somebody to handle those exceptions as part of the process. So the system notifies the process owner via email of the two problems that require some manual intervention. So one problem that we identified is we had a low quality scan on the original document, or a file that maybe somebody fat-fingered or miskeyed something in the original here that we received. So the system needs to do some additional input, or needs some assistance in terms of the data here related with this order. The next problem is the system could not find the customer info in the CRM system or other business systems. So there was a mismatch there. And then finally, as I mentioned, there appears to be a price mismatch that the system was able to detect automatically. In this case, simply by looking at the quantity, the price, and the subtotals of the line items. So there's two ways that we can validate data. We can do a lookup to another system to check that records are accurate. The other is we can just follow algorithms to make sure that the totals and subtotals all line up exactly how you'd expect them to as part of the process. And again, so here it just throws an error telling you, hey, these items don't add up. Can you please validate this? So one thing that's pretty exciting about the way platforms like Doc Alpha and applications like Order Action find information on an order and are able to identify and extract the right information is that they're increasingly self-learning. So in the scenarios we just described, you know, the point where there's human intervention is usually when we found that something doesn't match up or doesn't add up. In the past, the other pain point related to using systems like ours was that you had to spend a lot of time up front because, as I discussed earlier, when you've got a document that's semi-structured, the information that you're looking for can show up in a lot of different places. And so when you hear a lot of buzzwords in this day and age, like machine learning or robotic process automation, what we're talking about as we apply it to our solution is how the system learns over time and understands and relates to patterns so that it can extract information for you more intelligently across a broader range of different types of documents. So some of the basic ways to address these real-world speed bumps as it comes to extracting information and some more advanced approaches. Again, it starts with the basic approach, which is extracting information based on the location of the data in the document itself. But the problem is data can move around, right? You get different formatted orders and purchase orders and invoices and everything else, depending on the vendor or the customer that you're talking about. So the next step is to tie location to text or phrases. So you're looking for patterns and things like when you find text or a phrase like total amount, look within proximity to that for numbers or data, particularly something that may include a dollar sign or a decimal point, so it can extract that information. So it's using the location relative to contextual anchors that are nearby as part of that process. The knowledge and expertise, by the way, the system continues to adapt and learn, not just based on location, but again, based on patterns that it sees. And the great thing about that is that that information and knowledge is shared enterprise-wide. So if you've got multiple users working on different document types, at the end of the day, all the patterns and knowledge that are discovered by the system that allows it to adapt is shared across all of those users and all those different applications of our technology and our approach. What that means is you spend less time up front trying to anticipate every formatted document and every scenario before you can actually get started using the technology, and it gets better and more accurate over time. And this is really where all the discussion about the evolution of AI and machine learning gets interesting, because now you can create systems that go beyond following the specific steps we tell them to execute and tell them what we basically instead inform them of what the rules are We inform them about what the desired outcome is, like creating a valid transaction record in GP, and then we let those systems learn the best way to get there over time. The end result then is shortening the implementation down from months to weeks, because you can get the system up and running out of the box and that it adapts to your specific business dynamic. So we've covered 3 common scenarios here for processing orders, where automation can significantly reduce the effort required, improve the accuracy by relying on things like the information and data stored within Dynamics GP or other systems, and then shorten those cycle times to reduce your days sales outstanding, say that 3 times, and overall give you more process control. So usually at this point, we're asked, that sounds great, but what does it cost? And the answer is it depends. But the good news is that the pricing for a solution like Order Action and the platform that supports it, Doc Alpha, is aligned with the value you get from the solution itself and the volume of documents you need to process. So typically what we find is that the return on investment for putting a solution like this in place can be measured in months. The majority of our customers get a return on investment according to their own estimations in less than a year, and many of them can tell us that they've achieved a return on investment just based on the efficiency component, not based on access to data and better insights, within 6 months. So our ultimate goal as it relates to your role as a trusted advisor and partner to your manufacturing clients is to help you help them get more out of the value from Dynamics GP, even as their business grows and the volume and complexity of a basic operation like order processing potentially becomes overwhelming and becomes a bottleneck to the growth of their business. So we have dozens and dozens of Dynamics ERP clients who have adopted Doc Alpha and applications like Order Action and Invoice Action specifically because they had a concrete plan for how to grow their business, and they didn't want back-end processes that they couldn't control to slow them down. They can control things like order processing, and there's enough factors beyond what companies can control today that can slow them down and make, basically halt their plans or defer them. Order processing isn't one of those things. They can control that process, and automation helps them to achieve that. So finally, if you're seriously considering adopting process automation solutions as part of your portfolio as a Microsoft Dynamics VAR, why partner with us? First of all, we're very channel friendly. We've partnered with ERP VAR, we've reached out to the community, we've been an active participant, and we do a really good job, I think, of helping our partners get up running quickly. So we do a lot of hand-holding up front in terms of those early implementations. We don't require a lot from you up front in terms of getting training and certified just to get your first deal in. Those first deals then represent the opportunity for us to work with you and educate you when it's timely, relevant, and actionable. Lots of different components to our partner program that we'd love to talk to you about, both in terms of referrals and things we do to help grow your business and make that whole process simple and easy for you as well. With that, Adrian, I think it's probably time to turn it back over to you and to Chris. And I know you've got some call to action and Q&A at the end here. So if you've got any questions for me, feel free to keep them handy, save them for the end of the presentation. And then we've got plenty of time for Q&A at the end as well.
Thank you so much, Will. And Chris, go ahead and begin with StarShip. Thank you so much.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Will. Thanks, Adrian. I'm going to go through a brief PowerPoint here, and then we'll jump into a product demonstration. My name is Chris Lettner. I'm a sales rep for V Technologies. We are the developers of the StarShip solution. Been working with developing shipping solutions since 1989 and working with GP since 1992. So we're going to talk about our flagship product, StarShip, today, which is a multi-carrier manifesting solution for both parcel and LTL carriers. Some of the things that StarShip offers is the ability to rate and tender shipments with over 20 different LTL companies. We have built-in access to discounted rates available through the post office, as well as UPS, FedEx, DHL, all the major parcel carriers. Robust ERP integration into GP. With that, there's tools available to enhance and promote your brand through notifications, Reporting and analytics to gain insight into your shipping activities so you can see profit loss margins. We can also push data back into GP, including extender. Automation for the carrier selection process and picking the best rate based on transit time, weight, whatever business rules you have, we can enforce those through Logic and StarShip. EDI and WMS integration. So if your business has grown to that point where you need more efficiencies for larger trading partners and automation out in the warehouse, there's a number of other companion products that StarShip can bolt onto. We also offer a centralized deployment with support for remote desktop or Citrix, so StarShip can live in the cloud in a hosted GP environment. We find more and more of our GP clients are moving to a hosted setup. We can consume all the item data coming out of GP, and that helps streamline the process for international shipping, freight, hazmat, anything commodity driven that needs to appear on paperwork. Next slide here just shows you some of the various carriers that we have modules for, a mix of both national and regional carriers on the parcel and freight side. Some of the functions we're going to cover in the demo shopping. There's the ability to rate shop from within sales order processing in GP to take a look at the various rates as you're entering the order. There's also an API that can be called if you want to move that process further in carts, or you want to keep the users out of our screen. You can also do that on the client as you're processing shipments. Email notification gives you the ability to send out notifications as your product ships. That can include any kind of branding information that you want to include, colors and fonts and logos, links back into your site and your carts. Any of the ERP reference fields that you want to include with links that you can click on and easily track the product, so you can be proactively notifying your customers of when the product ships. Dashboard is a front office tool that's available for anyone in sales or accounting that needs to have access to the shipping records that may not live inside a GP. And for people that don't need to ship, it's a browser-based utility that gives you access to the history and all the activity out in the warehouse, as well as some additional reports that are built in. And finally, we have the EDI module. StarShip has the ability to generate the serialized container IDs for each of your boxes and pallets, as well as generate the 128 labels for your trading partners. And those can be printed in the same sequence as the rest of your shipping documents. We have plugins available for HighJump's TrueCommerce and Redtail products. I also have existing integrations with DataMasons, SPS Commerce, DI Central, and Edisoft. So with that, we're going to jump over into the product demo. Give me one sec here. Now, working with GP, you have the document ID is basically the key field that you're going to use to retrieve all of the order data. So if you have a pick list or a printout of the order, you can use a barcode on the paperwork to just scan in the document. You can do that here on the left-hand side. You can type it in. There's also a lookup available. You click on the spyglass there, and that'll give you a view of all the pending transactions, any orders that have quantities available to ship against. You can sort through the data here by clicking on the columns, and you can change the sequence and which fields you have available to sort on here, as well as filters, so you can drill down into a subset of data. Maybe you want to look at a specific batch or a certain customer, date range. I'm going to go ahead and just pick an order here and get started with the shipping process. The browsing window also allows you to multi-select orders. So if you've set up packaging for the different types of products, StarShip can also do batch processing where it can bring in a range of orders, print the labels, and then update each of those individual records back in GP. So you'll see all the product information appear down below here, and we're going to put that into our default container. StarShip can also have those packaging scenarios defined at the item level where it knows the packaging for each of your items. Over on the left-hand side here, it's going to fill in with all the order header data, the company you're connected to, the order that was selected, transportation information. That is the ship method that comes from GP at the order header or the line item level. Billing preference, we're going to pull over collect or third party from the customer card from the order header, as well as the account that you want to assign the charges to if your customer has a collect or third party account. Time in transit will show up here, letting you know when you can anticipate the product would be delivered by. Sender information, that is the return address. So if you have multiple entities or different businesses that you ship on behalf of, you can set up multiple dropship IDs here, as well as multiple accounts with each of the various carriers we support. Then you have the recipient information here. That can be pulled from the order header or the line item level in GP. With that, you'll notice the green checkbox there, lets you know that we validated the address. You'll also see the EDI integration turned on, letting StarShip know that this order requires that the ASN data be output so we can stage a file to send that information over to your EDI application. With the address validation, we can check the city, state, and zip. You'll notice we added the zip +4. That can be enabled as a preference. The street address, the suite, the apartment number, all that can be checked on the order import, and that'll reduce the number of errors that you're receiving and any additional accessorial fees that you'll have to pay on your bill. We'll catch the delivery area, so any surcharges that apply, that'll be figured into the cost of the freight. So we'll figure if it's residential, a rural area, or a commercial zone. And then this way you're capturing all that information up front, working with a clean address as soon as you begin the shipping process in StarShip. And when it's time to package things up, I have my default container here enabled. We just put our products into that. From here, we can split it up as well, though. You'll notice the dimensions appear here. StarShip has a packaging database that can store the dimensions of all of your different types of packages. With that, we can have a unique name for each box, the type of container that it is, the dimensions, and that's important for both UPS and FedEx ground service now charge you by the amount of cubic space the product takes up on the truck, not just the weight. So it can make a very big difference in terms of the price that you're charged. You can see here that the contents, we're bringing over the unit weights of the items from GP here, and that totals 13 pounds. But based on the size of the box, UPS is going to charge us for $52 on this shipment. So a pretty wide discrepancy in terms of the actual weight of the box versus the dimensional weight or the cubic space that it's going to take up. So with that, StarShip offers options to ship with the post office as well. Post office doesn't charge you for dimensional weight. It's a very good option for some of the maybe bulkier items, but lower weight, anything under 20 pounds. Typically, you can get a better rate going to the post office with very competitive rates and transit times. We can break this out here into multiple boxes now if we want. I'm going to go ahead and add a box. You can click on the next arrow here. I can add a package, or you have add package, delete package icons here to the right. There's also the repeat function. If you want to have multiple boxes instead of going one at a time, you can just click on repeat, and you tell StarShip how many packages in total you want to add to the shipment. From here, I can take items and I can drag and drop them into containers. If you want to use a scanning system, we also can link in with some pick-pack solutions. There's our GP Advanced plugin, which could connect with the Panatrack software. We also have integration into the GP Collect software from Celos. Now that everything's packed up, when we're ready to process, our controls are up here in the toolbar, or you have keyboard shortcuts here that can be used to kind of automate that process if you want to have barcodes to scan versus using the keyboard and the mouse. F5 or ship and process, that will complete your transaction, print out all of your documents, and then we'll take all that data, push it back into GP. Next to that, you have Control S or save as draft, allows you to stage the shipment. Maybe you want to set it aside, label some product, come back to it later. You also have the future date here that can be selected from a calendar, so you can begin to stage shipments in advance of when they're going to go out and reserve them for a particular day's manifest. All my reference fields are here, so those common ERP fields that are going to come over from GP, the order, the invoice number, customer's PO number, those are all searchable and be printed on documents. Department database can be used to basically record a cost center or business unit that you're attributing the shipment to. Can also be used to do some sorting on the historical reports. You have user-defined fields all over the place, shipment level, package, pallet level, items, orders. And StarShip can have an unlimited number of user-defined fields, similar to the GP extender tables. So you can continue to grow the database over time as your data requirements change. The carrier and service, we're of course going to pull that from the ship method in GP. You can always override it here if you set up the user's permissions, or you have access to rate shopping. Click on the $ there. It's going to call out to all the various carriers that you have access to on your StarShip system and give you a list of rates that you can then choose from. You can see here it came over as UPS grounds, but we have potentially some other cheaper methods that we can get it there by. StarShip can give you both the book rate or the published list price as well as your contracted negotiated rate. So we're comparing our costs here. You can see there's some other methods that we can get it there cheaper, and it'll sort them automatically down to the most expensive. You can also sort on the transit time, so if speed is more of an issue and a factor in the decision. You can also map over the date certain and time delivery when it needs to be there by, so StarShip will parse out any of those services that can't make that transit time, making the decision easier for you. You can also set up the system with ship via rules to take that decision out of the hands of the operator. You can let StarShip make that decision for you based on your business rules, whether it's the fastest, the cheapest, or whatever the conditions are that drive that logic. We'll go ahead and keep it with UPS here. At this point, if I'm ready to process, F5 or ship and process, that will complete my transaction, print out my documents. We have both thermal and laser labels, PDFs as well, if you want to email out attachments of any of your shipping documents. And as soon as we process this, we'll take a look back in GP at the results. Here we have a preview of one of the documents that StarShip can produce. You have these hybrid labels here that you have both the shipping label and the packing list on the same document. It's got multiple formats of these. All of those can be customized with whatever formatting changes you'd like to add. Once we've processed that, we're ready to move on to our next transaction. Cursor's going to come back over here waiting for input for your next order. So go ahead and minimize that there. And let's take a look back at GP. So we've got a number of things we'll update here in GP. We can insert notes here, and this can include as much or as little detail as you'd like to see there. Give you some basic information out of the box. We've got the header and a footer around our notes, so we're not going to touch anything that may be in GP already. And you can set this up with as much or as little details you'd like to see. Some basic information we give you out of the box: when it's going to get there, how it was shipped, number of pieces, the weight, and a breakdown of what was shipped out in each of the containers. You can also have the option of updating the batch ID on the right back, so we can kind of nudge it along the workflow. If you're doing fulfillment orders, we can also update the document status, whatever that numerical value is. Freight can be conditionally written back here, so that can include any kind of markup or discount you want to apply to your costs. User-defined fields we can update with any values here. In this case, I've taken my cost or my exposure on the freight, and we've updated this field here. So the $59.46 is what I'll be charged by the carrier. We're going to pass on a charge of $68.38 to our customer on the invoice. Then over here in the tracking table, we've inserted all the tracking numbers. So we can do that for each of the packages that you ship. If you're shipping freight, there'll be a bill of lading number there, or pro number for the entire shipment record. Some alternate things that we can do on the right back would be to update the ship method. If you change the carrier and service, let's say we switch it to FedEx or freight or postal, we can insert any of the actual ship methods that were used. The address correction, we can update the actual address where things went to here, if you choose that as a preference. We can also update the fulfilled quantities. So let's say something's out in the warehouse, it's not in stock, or you're going to short ship something, we can adjust quantities that you're going to invoice, move quantities back onto the order, as well as update the actual ship date. With the SQL extension, that opens up options for StarShip to read and write to GP's extender tables, also get into other related applications like SalesPad, CRM, service databases, shopping carts, any other data points that you might have on the network where you need to bring information into StarShip or take results from StarShip and post them back to other places. I'll go through some other quick options that you get here with StarShip. The item database here has a lot of information that may not live natively within your item master inside a GP. So we match on the part number, and we can kind of fill in the gaps with information that's learned over time about the behavior of how you process those shipments, or there's import routines where you can bring this stuff in from a flat file or a spreadsheet. So we'll keep all of the basic ERP information here from GP. We can set up the packaging scenarios where you can define a quantity of a product that goes into a certain size box, and that's useful for case packs or prepackaged goods. When you're shipping freight, we keep track of NMFC codes, descriptions for your bill of lading, freight classes for rating your LTL shipments. When you're shipping overseas, we also have all the definitions for how that export documentation should be filled out. So country of origin, Schedule B codes, descriptions, if you have to file with AES for the government, NAFTA paperwork, certificate of origin, shipper's letter of instruction, any of those flags can be set at the item level on what paperwork needs to be printed in order to clear customs. We also have a hazmat flag here, so if you have hazardous materials, all those properties can be saved here in our database as well. With the paperwork, I'll show you here quickly. You have all of the documents that are built into StarShip. So you have, the various carrier labels, some generic labels as well, documents, bills of lading, packing list, export documents. You have the ones that come from the carriers. The ones that are native to StarShip, you have access to go in and edit those. So you have a drag and drop user interface here that you can modify all of the paperwork. I'll show you the finished result here. Here's an example of our straight bill of lading. And this is what's underneath the form. So any of the templates that are built in here, you have access to modify these with whatever formatting changes you'd like. You can take any of this information, wipe that out, replace it with your own text. You have these objects over here on the left-hand side that you can drag and drop onto the page. Graphics, you can draw on the page, barcodes, bands of text, individual fields, or text boxes. So once you go through, you modify the documents with whatever formatting changes you'd like. Do a save as here. Give that a unique name, and then that becomes another iteration of that document that you can produce. So any of these documents can have additional rules at the print job level. We'll take a look at one over here. So that custom form can have all of your special formatting, and then you can trigger that based on the customer or the product, the country, whatever the case may be. You have some preferences here on whether or not you want to PDF that. With the PDFs, you can email out those copies. Multiple copies can be produced. You can have it print out automatically, or you can inspect the preview like we saw in the previous form. All of your carriers here, and then this is where you can set some conditions on when you should produce a certain version of that document. So we've assigned this to a particular country. So at any time I ship to France, we're going to pull that version of the commercial invoice. So all the documents, highly customizable with custom rules, and then conditions to print those out, whether they be paper-based, thermal, or PDFs. PDFs can then be included with the email notifications that go out. Take a look at the email notification here. There's templates that are built in here as well as the printed forms. You can set those up with your own formatting choices, colors, fonts, links, and you can drive traffic back to your sites that way. The attachments are pretty cool because you can grab static attachments. That could be a catalog, a warranty, some literature that you have a standard attachment that you want to send. Or those can be pulled dynamically from the shipment records. So any of those documents that are produced by StarShip could be grabbed and emailed out to the customer in real time. Same sort of conditions can be set on the emails as the printed documents, so you can assign those to particular customers, certain class of customer, whatever those scenarios are. You can pick and choose what the audience is for that particular email template. These can be sent out in real time. They They can be synced to a certain process within StarShip or a time of day, or they can be manually sent where they're just queued up and you're just tasking someone to go in and send those batches of emails at a particular time. So hopefully if you're proactively notifying your customers of the status, that cuts down on the number of inbound inquiries you're getting. Of course, we're putting results back into GP so you have that information there at your fingertips. So anyone that's in GP should be able to go into that transaction, find the record of what was shipped, when it went out, the tracking. We do also provide you with the dashboard. That is the customer service side of StarShip for the front office. Gives you the ability to do lookups here on StarShip's history using any of that common ERP data that comes over. So your order, your invoice number, PO, customer ID, address fields, any of those can be used to cross-reference the shipment. Do lookups here in StarShip. With that, you'll find all the order header information here, breakdown of the tracking, copy of the email will be here, the products and quantities that were shipped, breakdown of the charges, all your special services like COD, insurance, liftgate, any of that would be listed here. There's also a number of crystal reports that are built into StarShip. So we have some canned reports that are available here. If you're running GP, most likely you're using SmartList or SQL reporting services. All our views are in SQL. Typically, StarShip's running on the same instance of SQL Server as GP. So there's views that are exposed that you can easily query and extract whatever information you want directly out of the database. And we make documents available on how to access that data directly from the tables. And with that, I've gone through everything I had prepared. I'll turn it back over to Adrian for Q&A. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris and Will. Great presentation. We have a couple questions here. I'm going to go ahead and launch a poll while we're announcing the questions for the audience. So if you could just take a second to answer this poll, that'd be awesome. And it looks like we have a question about Doc Alpha from Stephen. Thank you, Stephen, for your question. You mentioned, Will, that sometimes emails are conversational. My company sells rugs. Orders are placed for a rug material on an X by Y dimensions and ABC binding. We process the order into specific part numbers and quantities that are combined to make that rug. Is that something that this program could do?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Adrian. That's a very interesting use case, and that's exactly the kind of scenario I'm talking about, where in the context of that email, if there's specific things like dimensions, right, or maybe there are quote marks for inches, or the X for the indicating the dimensions, or anything else that can be a cue to the system to look programmatically for specific information, it can lift that out of the email or the document. And then again, the backup or the assist there is also then going to refer back to other systems, right, to validate the data. So dimensions may not be something that it can cross-reference and validate, but if those dimensions then translate into an area, right, it can do the math on translating the dimensions in an area and make sure someone's done all of that correctly, particularly if that relates to how it's priced. So the short answer to the question is yes, absolutely. That's what we were talking about. And I'd recommend getting a one-on-one demo to talk about, take a look at the format and the information in the emails or in whatever other semi-structured orders you've got. And then we can show you how you'd configure that and how we'd set that up.
And then we have a question from Danny. Thank you, Danny, for your question. This one is for you, Chris. Looking to invoice once the order has been shipped, does either solution assist in this so that the order is transferred to invoice and posted to GP once the shipment has been completed rather than batch processing?
Thanks for the question, Adrian. StarShip does not generate invoices. However, with GP, there's a couple of things that we could do to trigger that. We can ship against fulfillment orders, and we can update the fulfillment order status, so we can kind of nudge it along the workflow, set that numerical status for when it alerts the front office for that to be turned into an invoice. We can tag the batch on the write back. which we've seen some customers use the batch ID with a stored procedure as a way to turn that batch of records into invoices at a certain point in the day or periodically throughout the day. StarShip also has the SQL extension, so we can write a little SQL to call a stored procedure that would also, act as a trigger to generate the invoices. So a couple different, methods of doing that. We would just need to take a look at your workflow and see what made the most sense.
And Will, I'm not sure if you have anything to add there as far as creating an invoice and posting that invoice to GP once the shipment has been completed. Is that a workflow that you might be able to?
Yeah, that's certainly possible. I mean, again, part of our integration does include creating those transaction records and the potential to associate a document to them. So maybe something upstream in the process where Doc Alpha can assist.
And I'm going to flash up the contact information here. I'm going to close out this poll. And it looks like 86% of you had voted. And I'm going to flash up our contact information. And so you should be able to see the contact information now. So we did record this webinar, everybody, and we will be sending out the recording after via email and along with all the contact information. And we just appreciate, again, everybody spending time with us. It looks like we have a couple minutes to spare. And thank you, Chris and Will. Great demonstrations and showing how your two solutions can work together in a workflow scenario with GP. And with that said, I'm just going to go ahead and end the webinar. Everybody, thank you again. We just appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll see you on our future webinar. Take care. Bye-bye.